he begins, he says that seeking a halal earning is an obligation for every single Muslim. This is a fard on every single Muslim. There has been a claim by many people who lack knowledge that there is no halal. There's no halal anymore. It's all become haram in some way. They said that the only thing, and this is of course was back during this time, he said the only thing that remains of the halal is the river, the water that flows to the river. Basically, and then the grass that grows from the earth. Everything else has been spoiled in some form or fashion. And we may be able to relate. And the Imam does bring this to light when the impermissibles become so widespread and mixed in so many different ways. How do you handle that? But because of that, and they say the reason for this is because all of the transactions have been spoiled in some form or fashion. And when they began to spread this idea, basically what they did was they essentially opened the doors for more doubts and also to pursue the haram. Like, well, there's no alternative, halal alternative, so we'll just go ahead and dive into the haram without any feeling of burden, of guilt. And of course, this is extremely ignorant and also displays, a lack of insight. There is a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was reported by Imam Bukhari and Muslim to have said that the halal is clear. He says, al-halalu bayyinun, wal-haramu bayyinun. The haram is very clear. وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا أَمُورٌ مُشْتَبِهَاتٌ. And between them there are doubtful matters. So when this claim that I mentioned to you was introduced, there was a great deal of harm that came from that. And it also harmed the faith. So basically, what's going to happen in the next section here is we're going to be looking at the difference between the halal, the haram, and the doubtful things. So there's three categories, and each of these three categories has subcategories that we have to keep in mind when we're out seeking a wage or dealing, in business, trade, transaction, whatever it may be. So the first here is he starts this talking about the virtues of seeking halal, the virtues of looking for a halal wage, and also some of the disparagement of the impermissibility. And there's also levels of both of these things. So he mentions in a verse from the Quran, Surah Al-Mu'minun, Allah says, "Ya ayyuha ar-rusulu kulu min at-tayyibati wa'malu salihah." O messengers, eat or consume that which is tayyib, that which is wholesome and halal, and work good deeds. So at-tayyibat, as many of us may be familiar with that term, is considered what is halal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded that the prophets, or I should say the messengers, consume the halal, the tayyib, before they do righteous action. Right? Fuel yourself with something that's wholesome, something that's halal, in order to seek halal endeavor, essentially. And then in another verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, he disparaged the haram. He says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ. And do not consume the wealth of one another in falsehood. Do not consume the wealth of each other through transaction and trade in falsehood, basically in that which is impermissible. And there are various other ayats we find in the Quran that kind of give us the same idea. The Prophet ﷺ was reported in a hadith found in Sahih Muslims, very famous hadith. He addresses the people and he says that Inna Allah tayyib, that Allah is good. La yaqbalu illa tayyibah, and He only accepts that which is good. And he continued with his hadith, and eventually in the hadith he comes to a portion, he says, mentioning a man who was away traveling, and he was dusty and disheveled. And then he raised his hands to the sky and he said, "Oh my Lord, وَمَطْعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَلْبَسَهُ حَرَامٌ وَغُذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ فَأَنَّى يُسْتَجَابُ لِذَلِكَ." He says his food was impermissible, his drink was impermissible, the clothing he was wearing was impermissible, he was nourished and taken care of by the impermissible, and after he raised his hands to the sky saying, "Oh, my Lord," he says, how would this person be answered? How is Allah going to answer the supplication of such a person who has done nothing but transgress the bounds of Allah, but then turns to Allah for assistance? And the thing that you have to note about this hadith is the condition of the person, the man, that he was away on a journey. This is number one. Travel, the dua of the traveler is accepted. This is from the Prophet's hadith. The supplication of the traveler is accepted. And then the condition or the state that he was in, his hair was disheveled and he was dusty. And this is also a state of humility, which is preferred to be in when you're going to beseech Allah and extend your hands. That you are wearing humble clothes, modest clothes. You don't go put on your finest and, got some swag, and you're coming in with you're strutting your stuff to Allah. No, but you come in appearance of humbleness and you bow your head and you beseech Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he says, and he put his hands to the sky, and that's another one of the manners in which you increase the likelihood of your supplication being answered. And then he calls upon Ar-Rabb. He says, Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb. And Rabb, another one of the ways in which you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rabb is the master. It's the Lord. Right? The one that takes care of and provides for. And so he's calling upon Allah in this way, basically acknowledging that it is Allah that provides. So he's essentially done everything that he can do. He's basically described in such a way that everything looks good. It's all positive. All the signs look good. Traveling, humble, hands up, hands out, extended to the heavens, asking his creator, his provider for something. But then it all starts to go away with how he was feeding himself, taking care of himself, etc. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he says, فَأَنَّا يُسْتَجَابُ لِذَلِكَ. How is it possible that this person will be answered? And so that is a clear disparagement of a person who seeks impermissible means. They seek an impermissible wage. There's another narration of the Prophet ﷺ that Sa'ad came to him and said that he wanted his supplications to be answered. And so the Prophet ﷺ advised him and said, he says, to make his food halal and wholesome. And then his supplication would be answered. Right? Sometimes, it's not sometimes, but a lot of the times we take that for granted. We really take that for granted. We discount that. The fact that what you eat, what you consume, there's no real impact. It's because it's so worldly, it's just, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that Allah has commanded us, and you know what? What we eat and consume is done on such a regular basis, on a day-to-day basis. And so if we're consuming that which is impermissible, or, nourishing ourselves, taking care of ourselves with the impermissible, we're in a constant state of continuous sin. And for that reason, he advised this companion to, do better with his diet. Seek the halal. And so the pious of the past, they would look for the halal. And they would be very particular about it. Right? They would be very concerned. He says one time Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he ate something that caused him a great deal of doubt after he ate it. And because of that doubt, he was unable to hold it down. And he ended up throwing it up. And, that was kind of the attitude of the early generation. And so we should make it a kind of a goal to begin to adopt that attitude and that behavior to model after those pious of the past.